Can't you even prepare properly? Hurry up and serve the food. You're causing trouble for Mom. My husband, muttering angrily, left the kitchen with an additional bottle of wine in hand. Of course, he didn't show any sign of offering to help. I silently started cleaning up the broken plates. I've had enough. Why is it always me? What's wrong? At that moment, it seemed that my late-arriving father-in-law heard the sound of the broken plates and showed up in the kitchen. He looked surprised as he saw the many dishes laid out in the cooking area. So many. Did you make all of this by yourself? In response to my father-in-law's attitude, I sarcastically replied with a half-resigned tone. It's always like this. And I stood up, gathering the broken fragments of the plates. Seeing me like that, my father-in-law seemed at a loss for words. His expression of surprise turned into a look of anger, clearly noticing the difference from when we last met, an exhausted version of me. I'm going to ask my wife what she's thinking. You come too. With those words, my father-in-law took me to the living room. My name is Catherine Rose, 32 years old. I've been married to my husband, Mike, who is 3 years older than me, for almost a year now. Before I got married, I was an outpatient nurse at a small pediatric clinic, but I recently moved to a general hospital in the same city to improve my skills. It's been a year since we got married, so according to the general perception, we would still be considered newlyweds. However, we are living with my mother-in-law at in-law's house since the first day of our marriage. Since my father-in-law is working away from home, my mother-in-law is left alone, and my husband worries her, so he suggested that we should live with her. At first, I thought having more people living together would be reassuring. I believed that we could help and support each other during busy times. But that turned out to be a huge misconception, and I would soon come to realize that. Catherine, that's awful. It was the first time I experienced a night shift since changing jobs. After finishing work at the unfamiliar hours from midnight to 8:30 a.m. and returning home feeling exhausted, I was greeted by my mother-in-law's displeased remark. It was 9 a.m. in the morning. My husband had already left for work, probably while I was on the way home. However, this time of the day is when people in the neighborhood often pass by our house. Whether my mother-in-law knew it or not, she aggressively approached me with a loud voice that could be heard outside. You didn't even prepare breakfast for me. What's the meaning of this? Huh? Breakfast? Caught off guard by the sudden question, I pondered its meaning and became perplexed. Because I had prepared breakfast for both of us last night and left for work. So most likely, my husband ate my mother-in-law's portion as well. Even when I pointed that out, my mother-in-law insisted that I was deliberately trying to annoy her. In the end, I had to make breakfast for my mother-in-law again, rubbing my sleepy eyes. You're such an inflexible daughter-in-law, causing me trouble. While making me prepare breakfast again, my mother-in-law didn't utter a single word of gratitude. Rather, she would take a bite and start complaining, saying things like it's too flavorful or it's too salty. But I was feeling sleepy and my head was foggy, so I decided to ignore those complaints and just leave the room as quickly as possible to go to bed. However, my mother-in-law heartlessly stopped me. Hey, Catherine, where do you think you're going? There are still dishes to be cleaned. I'm sorry, mother-in-law. I just finished my night shift, could you please take care of the cleanup? Huh? What are you talking about? Cooking includes cleaning, you know, and I specifically left the cleaning and laundry for you to do. So, if you want to rest, do those chores first, okay? Then at least after I rest. Why are you so entitled? You're my daughter-in-law, right? Well, I'm not a monster, but it would be different if you had children. But you don't have any, right? I understand. It seemed like I wouldn't be allowed to rest just yet. I forced myself, feeling as heavy as lead, to complete the chores as instructed by my mother-in-law. Leave the household chores to me when you have children. That has been my mother-in-law's favorite phrase lately. And it subtly implies, still no children? I suppose it's because my husband is the only son, so the expectations for grandchildren are concentrated on me. The wife of my friend apparently got pregnant on their honeymoon. And another person I know is already a mother of 3. I envy them. I really want to see my grandchild soon. I don't need to be told. I want to conceive as soon as possible too. At the very least, if I do conceive, I'll be liberated from this unpleasant daily life. But it hasn't happened. I've been taking care of my body for the past year, tried supplements, and even visited a church for the blessings of fertility. I thought I had tried everything, but still. Finally, when I finished the tasks with great effort, I turned to my mother-in-law to say, I'm going to rest now. But before I could say anything, she smiled and said, Good job. It's time for your nap. I want pasta for lunch. In the end, I was able to go to bed only when the clock had long passed noon. Hey, darling. About our fertility treatment, the doctor at the clinic says they'd like us to come in together to properly develop a treatment plan. So, could you keep this coming Saturday free? One night, when my husband's overtime and my work shift didn't coincide, I told the results from my initial visit to the fertility specialist clinic to him. Even though it was my first visit, all I did was submit my basal body temperature chart, get a blood test, and have a brief consultation. Huh? That's the first I'm hearing about it. You told me to go to the hospital when I'm concerned about not being able to have children. I did say that, but why do I have to go too? I understand why my husband would have questions. Even though it's a different field, I initially believed that infertility treatment was something women should handle on their own. That's why I went alone for the first consultation. But there, the attending doctor explained to me that treatment requires the cooperation of both husband and wife. To achieve pregnancy, it's important to assess the normalcy of both the wife's and husband's reproductive functions. By thoroughly examining aspects such as the volume and concentration of semen, as well as the motility and morphology of sperm, abnormalities such as azoospermia and oligospermia can be detected. Depending on the results, it could greatly influence the subsequent treatment plan. In other words, it is quite crucial for a semen test to be conducted during infertility treatments. So, they'll explain the treatment plan to you as well. Why should I listen? It's got nothing to do with me. That's not true. This is a matter for us as a couple, isn't it? Put yourself in my shoes, having to face your mother each time and being asked if we have a child yet. Don't speak ill of my mother. Isn't it because you're infertile that we're in this situation? Please get it sorted out quickly. That's why I need your cooperation. In addition to checking the fallopian tubes and follicles for infertility treatments, a semen test is absolutely necessary. I'm healthy and there's no problem. Our marital life is going on as usual and the volume is adequate, isn't it? So, there's no need for a test. Then prove it. What if my colleagues saw me going there? Are you trying to make me look bad? Anyway, I'm absolutely not doing it. Did I ask in a wrong way? My husband seemed to have taken offense, and, as if to say the conversation was over, he pulled the blanket over himself and started snoring loudly. Looking down at him, I let out a deep sigh. The existence of night shifts, I think, is one of the symbols that being a nurse is a unique occupation. The composition of night shift schedules varies by medical institution, but at my workplace after changing jobs, we basically work in 3 shifts, so in addition to daytime duties, there are 4 to 5 night shifts a month, and about 8 shifts including late night shifts. But what's hard is not the irregular working system. It's the amount of instructions from my mother-in-law given at home one after another. Although nurses are supposed to be exempted from daytime duties after a night shift, since I have to do housework, I actually had no days off. If I knew this reality was waiting for me from the start, I wouldn't have considered changing jobs. My mother-in-law started to get tough on me after we were married for a year. It's unbelievable to see my current mother-in-law, but she didn't force me to do all these household chores right after we got married. Is it because I haven't been able to conceive a child no matter how much time passes? After maintaining such a lifestyle for just over half a year, my body, which was once in a healthy shape when I first got married, had now become so skinny that my bones were visible, transforming into an obviously sickly figure. But oddly enough, neither my mother-in-law nor my husband seemed to notice my changes. Because we see each other every day, we might just overlook some things because of that. One day in the summer, my husband approached me with a gleeful look, having a plan in mind. Mom's turning 60 this Sunday, and we're gonna have a party for her. She's pretty pumped and wants to invite a bunch of friends, so could you help out with the prep? Saying so, he handed me a piece of paper. Written in my mother-in-law's handwriting were the names and contact information of the guests, the menu for the meal, the specified tableware, the order of serving the dishes, and even the brands of alcohol to be prepared. What was astonishing was the number of guests and the schedule. With my father-in-law's name taken for granted, I blurted out, 10 people. Cooking for that many with this menu. And on Sunday, I'm just off a night shift. Can't be helped. Mom insists it has to be that day. You'll be fine. You're always up until mid-afternoon anyways. It's a daytime celebration, no problem. And with that, he left me standing there, shocked. I bet neither of them are gonna help, I thought, strangely certain of this amidst my stunned thoughts. The morning of the 60th birthday party arrived, and I staggered home, just off a night shift as usual. I began the household chores and party preparations as my mother-in-law instructed. Having done the laundry and cleaning the night before seemed to have helped, but some of the food that was supposed to be bought in advance had been eaten by husband, so I had to go shopping again. Thanks to this mishap, Guests began to arrive at our home before I even started making the main dish. While my mother-in-law, all dressed up and full of energy, showed the guests around, I hurriedly prepared drinks, a few appetizers, and glasses. I'd managed to finish the main course while they were enjoying these. But time was already tight, yet I kept pushing myself. Yet, catching up once you've fallen behind is easier said than done.
What are you doing, Catherine? You're slow.
It seemed my mother-in-law had given some sort of instruction. Just when I was about to finish up the main dish, my husband came stomping into the kitchen. Looking at the scene of dishes still not served, he furrowed his brow.
Not ready yet. Can't you prepare properly? Serve the food quick. Don't trouble Mom.
He grumbled and grabbed the wine bottle that had been left to breathe. At that moment, the stacked plates for serving collapsed. Several fell from the counter and shattered. They were my mother-in-law's favorite plates, and I turned pale. But Mike looked calm.
Shouldn't have stacked them there,
he said, and then he left the kitchen. Of course, there was no sign of him helping. I squatted down on the floor and quietly started cleaning up the broken plates. I'm so tired of this. Why is it always just me? What's happened? A gentle voice reached my ears. Surprised, I turned around. There was my father-in-law, John, standing at the kitchen entrance with a large bag. He had apparently arrived late. Oh, a plate broke, did it? Are you hurt? His words, devoid of reprimand and filled with genuine concern, unexpectedly warmed my eyes. I can't remember the last time someone spoke so kindly to me in this house. After all, I haven't seen John since New Year's. John came over to me, squatted down, and helped me clean up the broken plates. He then looked surprised at the abundance of food in the kitchen. All of this, Catherine? Did you make all this by yourself? He looked around for anyone else who might have helped with the preparations. But there was no one else to be found. He was never there from the start, in this house. I half-heartedly said in self-mockery, in response to my father-in-law's demeanor. It's always the same thing, you know. Then, I gathered the shards of dishes I had cleaned up and stood up. Seeing me like that seemed to leave my father-in-law at a loss for words. I was not the same as when we met before, a clear image of me, worn out. My hair and skin were in a terrible state, dark circles under my eyes, and no traces of the cheerfulness I once had. The mountain of dishes in front of me and my words. All the pieces led him to a single conclusion. The surprise on his face turned into anger.
I'm going to ask my wife what she's up to. You should come too,
he said in a tone lower than I've ever heard, about to leave the kitchen. I hurriedly stopped him.
But the cooking isn't finished yet. You don't need to do it.
He silenced my small resistance. Then, my father-in-law took me to the living room. When we got to the living room, my mother-in-law was pouring the wine my husband had brought for their guests while chatting with them.
Catherine, dear, how much longer will you keep us waiting? Oh, you're finally here, too. Everyone, this is my husband, John. He's been working away from home for a long time, but he came back especially for me today.
As my mother-in-law introduced John, the guests gave a polite nod. In response, John gave a slight bow.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming today. I'm John, her husband. My stupid wife always appreciates your kindness. Oh John, you're so mean, calling me a fool. You know it's my 60th birthday today, right? A fool is a fool, not a sign of humility, but the real thing. What?
That single word, and the cheerful atmosphere in the room instantly turned silent. John, who had me standing hidden behind him, had me stand beside him and turned back to the guests.
Let me introduce you. This is Catherine, my son's wife. John, dear, Catherine is still busy with preparations.
Ignoring his wife's attempt to stop him, John continued. A year and a half ago, she married our son. She was a cheerful girl with a big heart, and above all, she had a wonderful smile. I was sure that she would bring a bright future to our son. But how does she look to you all now? At least half a year ago, she wasn't this worn out and she didn't look lifeless. As John stopped speaking, whispers spread among the guests. She looks so different from the photos. She's obviously lost too much weight. Listening to them, John turned to his wife.
Explain why Catherine has changed so much. I don't know. Isn't it because her work is too hard? She switched to a hospital with night shifts after New Year's, remember? So you're saying that all of Catherine's colleagues are in this state of health? That's a clear violation of labor laws. I need to contact the Healthcare Workers Union. No, that's not it. You're still playing dumb? I heard it. You've been working Catherine to the bone without giving her a break. Even today, she just finished a night shift. And you let her handle all the cooking for this many people alone.
That's how it happened. When I stepped from the kitchen into the living room, I opened up to my father-in-law about everything. For the past 6 months, I was given hardly any days off and lived my days like a maid. My mother-in-law turned her face away, unable to argue, and then my father-in-law stared hard at my husband.
You too, Mike. You knew Catherine has been going through this, so why did you do nothing? Well, isn't that a problem between Catherine and Mom? I have nothing to do with it. What did you vow at the wedding? Didn't you promise to protect and make her happy? Does she look happy to you now? Well, yeah, there were times when I thought things were getting out of hand. But Mom said that it's natural for a wife without a child. A man should prioritize his spouse over his mother. You drove your previous wife to the edge. Did you forget your past divorce?
At my father-in-law's words, my husband fell silent, his face turning beet red. And I, too, looked up at my husband with my mouth agape in surprise. I knew he had been married before, and I had decided to marry him knowing this. But I had no idea that his ex-wife had been treated in the same way as I am now. But while I was surprised, a part of my mind somehow oddly accepted, so that's what happened.
Let me tell you this, doing this much work is only natural for a daughter-in-law without children. A year and a half into marriage and still not blessed with a child, you're failing as a wife. This woman is. Even if she is infertile, there's no fault in that. So, your claim is simply venting your anger. What? What do you know, you who've been away from home all the time? You don't know, do you? The misery of being the only one without a grandchild while everyone else is bragging about theirs. I wanted a grandchild so badly.
With that, my mother-in-law finally broke down crying. I felt a bit sorry for her, but that didn't make the physical and mental pain I had endured for the past 6 months disappear. Even more so because there was a history with his ex-wife.
It's impossible, you know. I'm sure no grandchild will ever come to you.
I said so firmly, and then I thrust a few scraps of paper I had brought from my room into my mother-in-law's face. It was the result of the tests at the fertility clinic I was attending.
Blood tests, AMH, uterine tube patency tests, anti-sperm antibody tests, etc. Everything was normal. My body is fine. If the same was true for your previous wife, there's only one answer to be drawn from that. The problem is with you, Mike. Huh? You must have had an inkling, right? That's why you were so resistant to the tests, weren't you? Yet, instead of defending me, you treated me like a housemaid along with your mom. Until now, I had been quiet about these test results because I still loved you. But today, after being yelled at again, and not getting any help, and finding out you had done the same to your ex-wife, I just don't care anymore. Let's get a divorce, Mike. Wait a minute. You're saying I'm sterile, that's not true, is it? If you feel that way, why not just get a proper checkup? To be honest, I couldn't care less about the result anymore.
Having had my say, I turned my back on my husband, who was persistently making some excuse, and my sobbing mother-in-law, and left the living room. Just before I closed the door, I faintly heard the guests getting up from their seats one after another. After that, my husband and I formally divorced through our lawyers. My husband tried to fight it, but thanks to my father-in-law recording our conversation that day in the living room, it was recognized that I had been suffering emotional abuse from my husband and mother-in-law for 6 months. Moreover, my husband reportedly had a semen analysis which confirmed that he was indeed infertile, and my mother-in-law was apparently livid. After the divorce proceedings between my husband and me concluded successfully, astonishingly, my former in-laws decided to divorce as well. According to my former father-in-law, I had hoped that Mike would reflect on his behavior towards his ex-wife and change, but it didn't happen. I received an apology from John for not realizing the situation sooner and not ensuring his son took a sperm test before we got married. A year later, according to a rumor, my former mother-in-law, who was kicked out of her ex-husband's house, is now living in a public housing complex in the same city with my ex-husband. And she's apparently been cut off from her former friends. Moreover, the rumors spread through those friends, and now my ex-husband is reportedly having a tough time at his workplace. I was then introduced to a man by John, and after 6 months of dating, we got married. This man is a subordinate of John's, whom he highly trusts. Now, we are living happily together. Recently, I found out that I'm 2 months pregnant when I visited the gynecologist, so we're planning to share the news with John soon. After all, he is the matchmaker for us and the person who saved me from a difficult situation.